This is Coach Becky from Doc Wayne, and I'm here with Tref Borden, the Executive Director of the Fish Family Foundation, and this is episode 8 of Doc Wayne's Kids and COVID-19 webinar series. And before we begin today, I just wanted to acknowledge the death of George Floyd and the ongoing systemic racism, injustice, traumatization, and the violence which targets communities of color in America. And I encourage you to read Doc Wayne's statement and the resources provided on our social media handles that were put out this morning, and to reach out should you need mental health supports. You can always reach us at support@docwayne.org and on our website, docwayne.org. We stand by communities of color and those impacted. So we couldn't continue on with our Kids and COVID-19 series without acknowledging what's going on in the world today. With that, I wanted to say hello to our guest today, Tref. Tref, how are you?
I'm actually really good. I've been home. We closed our office on March 6th. I stopped counting on day 60, I think. We're going on 3 months now, but I'm home in Brookline with my girls. We're healthy. I have my job still, so I consider myself lucky, and we're good. We're hanging in there. I don't have the homeschooling that some of my friends had to do, and my kids aren't little. And I know you have 2 little ones, right?
I do, and homeschooling is a whole new ball game. But everybody has their own challenges with kids at different ages and stages.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, having they're teenage girls, one's 17 and she just graduated. At least she thinks she did. She's not really sure because it's also up in the air. She's supposed to go to school. She's going to go to San Diego State in the fall, but now they're online. And the 15-year-old just finished her freshman year. So they're a little stir crazy. But so far, there's been no calls to the police. But for us, work has been the most challenging because the Fish Family Foundation is primarily a funder of immigrant services, as well as youth and community-based mental health. And those happen to be populations that have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic. As you mentioned earlier, communities of color, they're being the hardest hit. And for us, immigrants, whether, even undocumented immigrants, they do pay taxes, but they don't qualify for any of the stimulus package aid. They don't qualify for unemployment, even if they pay their taxes. If you're not documented, you can't get any unemployment. And they don't qualify, even if they're a green card holder, legal permanent resident, they don't get that $1,200 payment from the IRS and the $500 per child. So it's their communities, they come from communities that are struggling and isolated already, and then this pandemic has made it all worse. They're in very unstable housing, and a lot of them, a lot of the immigrant communities is supporting those frontline worker jobs like meat packing, the fish packing in New Bedford. So they're at super high risk, and they have really few resources. So what we've been doing as a foundation has been trying to work with all of our partners to get direct aid to vulnerable immigrant families, as in, gift cards, cash payments. They can't always access things like food banks. So it's been crazy busy, but it's been good. It's kept us focused. It's been like drinking out of a fire hose most days, but we're getting a lot done, and we have really good partners to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for giving us that insight into what's really happening on the ground for these disadvantaged members of our community. And can you tell us a little bit about what you might be doing for yourself these days too, Tref?
Yeah. The thing that's so tough about these times, what are the big stressors in life, right? It's lack of information, lack of control, and lack of certainty. And we've got all 3 of those things big time right now. And so, I've tried to focus on just letting go of the things I can't control, which is hard. I've shared with you before, I'm in school for a master's in mindfulness studies at Lesley. And that's been enormously helpful because that whole practice is about just staying present in the moment, and not obsessing over things in the past and not worrying about the future. So that training has really come in handy because we have no certainty. We have very little control over our lives right now. And the information we're getting is conflicted and confusing and contradictory. So I can't say I've really been on a meditation practice as much. It hasn't really been accessible. It's just too hard when I'm this distracted. But I practice yoga, and not the kind of like Gumby doll yoga, hot, sweaty exercise yoga. I mean, but for me, it's more of it's relaxation, and breath is really important. Breathing. I think people ask me all the time, what's a good short-term fix for how we're feeling? And I think just sitting up straight and taking really deep belly breaths activates your mental health professional. So, they've done studies. Breathing activates that part of your brain, which, downregulates the nervous system. So if situations we're in puts us into panic mode, you got to just calm that down and bring the other part of the nervous system online. And breathing does that beautifully, and it's accessible to anybody. So that's what I've been doing. And structure too. I think, the first week that we were in lockdown, we closed March 6th. No one else had closed yet. So I think a lot of people even thought we were kind of overreacting. But, I have some staff that are in a pretty high risk category. My trustees are older. I have a pregnant employee, one with an immune compromised child. And I was like, I don't want people coming in on public transportation. But our first week home, we weren't really prepared for working remotely. We didn't really know how long it was going to be. And we all just sort of I was kind of wandering around in my pajamas for the first week. I was sleeping late. But after that first week, we all felt like if we were going to survive this thing, we just needed structure, routine. So we have daily calls, on Zoom, and just really, that's what sort of kept us all sane, is because it's a way for us to connect, but also we just need that predictability and structure in our lives, or you just sort of you can just go into too many dark places. And same thing with the riots and the protests that are really freaking a lot of people out. Those same tools help, just staying calm, breathing, staying present, and just not letting yourself get mentally too out on a limb on it.
Yeah. In all of our conversations around kids and COVID-19, we've talked to so many different people, and regulation and breathing have come out in many conversations.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they haven't tried meditation, or they haven't dove deep, I would say. What tips might you have for them to start trying it, or at least take a deep breath during their day? Do you have any beginner tips for folks?
Yeah. There's actually, mindfulness has become a bit of a buzzword, right? But there actually are some really good resources online. There's some good stuff on YouTube. I mean, there's the Dalai Lama showing alternate nostril breathing, which is a stress relieving breath. I know that a lot of yoga classes also practice pranayama, or breathing. But I think for newbies, those videos are the most helpful because they're accessible, they're simple, they're short, and you don't have to do a deep dive into Buddhism and mindfulness to get the benefits of it. I think one of my professors at Lesley, who's a very well-known Buddhist scholar, is the director of the entire program. Even he says, sometimes your practice isn't accessible. They say you got to meditate 20 minutes a day. He's like, I don't know if that's true. To get the benefits of it, it doesn't have to be this big thing. And sometimes if you only sit down for a minute, or if you just, I used to do it on the tee. I would sit on the tee and just kind of close my eyes and stay inside, but we're not on the tee anymore. But sometimes just a minute, and the breathing is really key. And in terms of the yoga, it doesn't have to be, you know, a big, you know, full-on hour-long vinyasa. Literally, even just the stretches. Or there's great videos on. Wait, you had one. You guys had a video on the Doc Wayne YouTube channel with the chair yoga. It was that's really helpful, and you can do it anywhere. And you don't have to like go put on a Lululemon outfit to do it. You don't need a mat, you know. I was just in Rwanda just before all this happened. I got back on March 1st, and we were doing trauma trainings in Rwanda. And it's culturally really different. You know, our program, you like lie on the floor and do guided meditation. They don't do that. They don't lie on the floor. In Rwanda, it's scandalous, and women don't wear pants, right? So we adapted it to be, you know, standing or sitting in chairs. And we were talking like 10 minutes, and it's really, really, really helpful. I think, you know, if anyone wanted to, I had shared with David Cohen from Doc Wayne this book. It's Buddhist in principle, but it's really adaptable on a secular level. So yeah, he was the author of Mindfulness in Plain English. I can't pronounce his name, and I should be able to. There, do that.
Thanks for showing it on the screen. I think people could see it. I appreciate that. And I just want to reiterate the chair yoga because I do love it. I was introduced to it through the International Trauma Conference that is held here. Okay. And this year was virtual, and there were 4,000 people attending, which is amazing in itself. Wow. That people are investing 3 days of their time in a virtual conference learning about trauma. But chair yoga is amazing because people of all abilities can do it. That's the other piece.
Right. Right.
So you can just do it, and if you're working, you can also squeeze a little bit of chair yoga into your life. So that's fantastic. But thank you for those tips, Tref.
It's helpful because it keeps you focused in the present and not, I think in times of stress like this, you can you could let yourself go down a path of obsessing and worry about things that you can't control. I'm not saying we all put our heads in the sand and ignore what's going on around us. It's just that, just the ability to stay calm with it and just live, like sitting with the discomfort. Mm-hmm. That's the best way to put it.
Right. And there's certainly a lot of discomfort going on in the world today, for sure. Yeah, I also wanted to loop back to some of the comments you made in the beginning of our time today about just the realities of the world and you as a funder or just sitting in that space of philanthropy and ask, where do you think kids' mental health fits? And just there are so many different social issues, and where do you think that falls?
So in the 20 years that I've been in philanthropy, I mean, there was a break in between there. There's a big 10 when I was in New York and 10 years here in Boston. I've always been with foundations that focused on high need populations. Everyone's always looking to break the cycle. I think that kids' mental health is kind of foundational to everything. So if you look at kids that wind up in foster care, that wind up court involved, that struggle with learning, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Generally, something's happened to those kids, something's happened in their lives that was beyond their control. Often they feel that it's their fault, that there's something fundamentally wrong with them. That's one of the problems, the lasting impacts of trauma. And that if we don't address those issues first, the rest of it's, I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but it's really an uphill battle, right? The number of youth in juvenile detention with diagnosed mental disorders or issues is the statistic that I hear most is 65%, but I guarantee it's higher. I mean, people don't, young people that act violently are doing so for a reason. Like that's their adaptation. That's how they've learned to behave, to survive in their world. Other kids adapt in other ways, but I don't see, I think, and I'm 57, right? So I'm that generation that's now leaving behind me a much different world than I inherited. And we're leaving these kids, we're leaving today's youth with, a lot of issues, like everything from environmental. I mean, in this country, it's race right now with George Floyd, but that's across the globe. And I just think if we're going to leave young people this mess to deal with, we need to address everything we can do so that they're capable of handling it. We need to build their resilience. We need to have universally available mental health services. People who need it most can't get it. And it's, part of it's a manpower question. I mean, there's just not enough mental health professionals to meet the need, but it's critical. We've been talking about it a lot at work with my trustees about how we're a fairly small foundation. How do you make a dent in it? We're members of a funders collaborative that's really focusing on youth mental health. In particular, the Smith Family Foundation and the Carmen Foundation together have that huge initiative. If I had the kind of money that like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, I would put it all into kids' mental health. And I'm speaking as a professional and also as, a mom of kids. And I've seen how hard it is. I mean, I've dealt with it with my own kids. And until you get some of those other things out of the way, how can kids learn? How can they grow up and pursue careers successfully if we haven't, helped take care of all those issues that can get in their way of succeeding?
Yeah. As a mental health professional and as a mom, I thank you for your support and for those words supporting mental health services. I think some of the tricky things around mental health are around engagement and sort of the delivery mechanisms to get those services to kids.
Yeah. Well, it's also, there's, as much as people talk about it now, there's still a lot of stigma around it. And I get that. I have it myself. I mean, I've had my own mental health issues. I have, I have an adult son with really severe ones. And I've always been very open about that. I've always struggled with it to the extent that it's like a violation of his privacy on the one hand. But on the other hand, if we can't talk about it, we can't work with it. And until people, I mean, everyone says there shouldn't be any stigma around it, but people still feel that. One of the lessons in the trauma training that we do is all about how, adverse childhood experiences, including trauma, are experienced in the body, how they're processed by the brain, and what that leads to. And it's biological and it's normal. And everybody, like everyone's got the same brain mechanisms, right? So the ways in which our bodies adapt or we mentally adapt or behave or whatever, that is normal. And that was really important in Rwanda because they're uncomfortable with the mental health issues, right? And you can't help people if they're afraid to get help. I think here, I can only speak to the greater Boston area in Massachusetts. I think access to culturally competent care is hard. It's not just the language, it's just people come to things from different ways. And with young people, it's especially complicated. There's the issue of the stigma, they don't want to be laughed at by their friends, they're embarrassed, but also just getting to them. I think that's why what Doc Wayne does is so important, because you can get to them.
Yeah, thank you. Kids definitely vote with their feet. It doesn't matter if it's mental health services or dinner or whatever. Yeah. They choose and they make their choices based on their engagement. But thank you, Tref. I think that means a lot to the provider community to have a funder speak up for us. I wanted to also ask you, as we're in this very complex world, from the philanthropy perspective, and as someone who's invested her career in this work, how can people get involved in philanthropy, whether that's through giving funds or giving their time or their talent? What would you recommend to people to get involved?
It's totally a mix, right? And you should try different things and then see what clicks with you. Obviously, right now, especially funding is important. But I think for some people, it's hard to know where to allocate their funds. There's a lot of great causes, like how do you prioritize? I personally always found myself stretched too thin because of the work I do. I meet so many amazing organizations. I want to support all of them, but I had to make some hard choices around what my priorities were, because I just felt like, that scattershot approach wasn't really being effective. For me, it's women and girls with mental health and trauma. So I've targeted my energies there. I give as much as I can, but I also give my time. I think volunteering is one of the best entrees to philanthropy, because by doing that, you understand what causes are most important to you. You understand better how nonprofits work. You understand better the clients that you're working with. I think volunteering in a direct engagement way is really helpful. I think for people, I know that time is always a constraint, right? So you can only do what you can do, but there will always be some way to plug in. I think for the nonprofit community, they're always trying to cultivate new donors, new volunteers, and board leadership, particularly individuals of color, people that represent the communities they're working in. That's a struggle. So if you're one of those folks, find a way to if you can't be on a board, then at least be on the advisory board or something in the interim. And I think people have the sense that if you can't be writing the big checks, that it's not effective, right? But I have to tell this one fund that was raised by there's a small organization. They're based in Somerville, but they do work in Everett, Malden, and Medford on behalf of immigrants. And they raised a fund locally from their folks. And we're not talking we're talking like community members. Some of them are giving like $10. That's a lot. When you added it all up, they had raised, well, last I heard, like $40,000 from small donations. Yeah, one $10 donation doesn't feel significant, maybe to you giving it, but it does make a big difference. And so the important thing is, find what works for you in terms of engagement. Some people just want to give and they don't want to put their time into it. That's totally cool. Find what works for you, start small, and follow your gut from there. If you're not enjoying it, if you're volunteering for the sake of volunteering, you're not enjoying it, don't do it. It's not helping anybody. That's one thing. I do think community service programs in schools are important, but I do question sometimes, like if it's just if it's just a course requirement, it's just something they have to do. Does the message get through? I don't know, maybe, but I think it's so, especially now, it is so vitally important for people to understand the extent to which we're all connected and our interdependence. And I think active philanthropy, but also just active social as a volunteer or any other way that's the best way to understand that. And I think if we don't get that, we're already feeling pretty broken right now. But if we can't get that, if we can't really recognize our interdependence and our interconnection, then we're broken.
Yeah, certainly. And I think there's a lot of health benefits to what you're speaking about. I know the question was about philanthropy, but we're in a time where there's a lot that's uncontrollable around COVID, around systemic racism. And you can control what you do and you can control your response.
Right.
And
right.
These are things that you can take action upon. You can volunteer virtually, perhaps, in your community. You can control how you respond. So also connectedness is well associated with health. So finding that way that you can feel connected to something that you belong to or that you believe in will ultimately impact your health and your community's well-being. So
exactly, because they depend on each other. And from the philanthropic community, we're having a lot of conversations about how we work, how we are as funders, as grant makers, and how that's changing as a result of the pandemic. A lot more foundations have shown a lot more willingness to give unrestricted support. I was shocked to the extent to which foundations were willing to give direct cash assistance to individuals, because in the past, it's always like, no, you can't trust them to have money themselves. You got to give it to the people that are going to help them. That's no longer the case. Everyone that I work with has increased their giving, and we meet weekly by phone, by either, just by interest group or what have you, just to coordinate our efforts and to try to be more impactful by working together instead of all the foundations funding in isolation. We're starting to talk now about, the pivot, just, as you pivot, the organizations we're supporting are pivoting from emergency response support, what does it look like longer term? I think, this crisis has really kind of shown some of the cracks in the foundations of the nonprofit sector, some of which has been, I don't want to say, exacerbated certainly by funding. A lot of funders want to fund only program growth or programs, or new programs. I hear a lot from grantees that have public contracts that there's not sufficient administrative support in the contracts. They have to raise funds to do the work. I think we're now seeing a nonprofit sector where, insufficient operating reserves, such a focus on raising their budget every year, there hasn't been any focus on the balance sheet. So they don't have the capacity to weather a situation like this. And I know that we're thinking this way, and some of my colleagues are too, that, our role as philanthropists, how do we do things differently, looking at what we've learned and watching this crisis hit the nonprofit sector so hard. And I think we need to give differently. I think we need to stop obsessing over program innovation and growth, and to some extent, just focus on the capacity of organizations that do the work. So I feel like I'm hearing a lot about that now. I'm hoping that lasts.
Yeah, I certainly hope that lasts, and we thank you for your leadership around that, and hope that that thought grows. And I know that's certainly true in the sector, and we're experiencing that in terms of
I imagine
on the ground. Yeah. Well, Tref, thank you so much. I wanted to offer you a chance to ask me a question, given that I've been peppering you with questions for the past 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm open to anything you might ask me.
Yeah, I do have a question. And thank you for letting me talk so much. I know I can get a little touchy-feely woo-woo sometimes on the mindfulness stuff.
It's honestly been wonderful.
Keep that out of it. But I love your perspective as a mental health professional, but particularly someone who works a lot with youth and works in the communities you work in, about, how I'm struggling with how to talk to my own kids about the systemic racism, but also the unrest and, the anger, which is so valid. But how do you turn the anger? Anger can be so destructive. How do you make it productive? And just especially for young people, because I know with my own kids, they're just they feel hopeless. They want to do something. They wanted to go to the protest. And I was like, well, no, they ended up, I didn't want them at the protest. So they made a bunch of signs. I got together with friends. I made I think they bought all the poster board at Target, and they made signs and they put them up everywhere. Both, positive messages, of support for the communities of color, but also where they can donate. And that's great. But I struggle with how to talk to them about this, especially as a white privileged family. It's just hard sometimes, and any pointers you have would be really helpful.
Sure.
And just your view on it.
Yeah. So I also want to acknowledge that I am also white, and I have immense privilege. So I'm only sharing my perspective and what I think about this question. So if there are listeners or viewers who might have more to add, I certainly welcome their perspective, and they can email us at support@docwayne.org. But at least my perspective is that most of the social justice movements that have happened globally for hundreds of years have been led by young people. And so as someone who works with young people, I want to lift them up and lift their voices up and also infuse hope. So we don't want them to start to feel hopeless in the situation, and want to tell them that they are the future, and we want to equip them with skills to learn about things like advocacy and peaceful protest, and really like how to use their voice in a powerful way. And in terms of race, I think it's important that you talk to your kids about race, and you model what you want them to learn. So they're looking at you every day, and they're listening to you, whether you like it or you don't. So if you're directly
listening ever.
I know. Sometimes we honestly don't think they're ever listening to us, but they are. So when you're directly speaking to them, or you're talking on the phone, or you're talking in the kitchen to your significant other, they're still listening. So we want to talk in a way that they can learn from that. And we also want to talk in a developmentally appropriate way when we are speaking directly to them, because we need to phrase things in a way that they can understand. And we also want to be really mindful of the media that's in our homes, and especially for our young readers, the kids who can read, they're reading the screen when we have the television on, and so we need to be careful of what we're putting on our television screens or our phone screens while our kids are around. So that's what I'm thinking of, and I know our team at Doc Wayne is interacting with our kids, and they're providing telehealth to them. And the majority of our kids at Doc Wayne are living in communities of colors, or they're Black or brown boys. So we're having these conversations, and we're initiating them most of the time. Because we want to be there for them, and we want to support them through this. And it's important to have conversations about race.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents, but in no way am I an expert. And again, I want to reiterate that I'm a white woman who has significant privilege.
Yeah, I hear you. It's just finding ways to be productive and inoffensive.
Yeah.
And trying to help my kids. My daughter's boyfriend is Black, and she's now worries about him obsessively all the time. She's, like, if about him, getting into a scuffle and ending up dead. And I'm trying to think about how to talk to her about that, to how to be reassuring, but not can't candy coat it. I mean, it's a fact. And so it's hard. But thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Tref, I want to thank you for your time today, and for all the words of wisdom, the tips, and the resources that you provided to our viewers.
Thank you.
Of course. And for those who perhaps joined midway through, as I see some people popping up on Facebook Live, this is part of a larger series named Kids and COVID-19. And if you want to view past sessions, you can see them on our YouTube page, and the handle is Doc Wayne, DTG. And this is our 8th episode. So there are 7 others that you can find there, and there are a variety of different topics, but they're all about kids and COVID-19. And if you need us, you can reach us at docwayne.org. And right now we're providing telehealth services to kids and adults. We've expanded our services normally in alignment with our mission to fuse sports and therapy to heal and strengthen at-risk youth. We go out into schools, community centers, and residential treatment facilities, and we harness the power of sport to reduce stigma and increase access for kids. So again, just to say it one more time, if you need us at all, please reach out. Again, our contact information is support@docwayne.org, and please stay healthy and happy during this very challenging time. Take care and bye-bye.